When you first learn to dive, your instructor teaches you how to dive and how the equipment works, but there are other guys and girls there at the dive site helping you out, so you do things right. But who are these noble divers helping you out? These are humble dive masters. Dive masters are the very first tier of professional scuba divers in the PADI training regime, and they act as skilled assistants to instructors. So you'll often have one instructor and a few dive masters on your course, keeping you safe and teaching you how to dive, because your instructor can't be everywhere at once. So dive masters unfortunately have a rough life in the professional diving community, and we do kind of make fun of them, but that's just because we were all dive masters at one point in our diving career, and much like the military or prep school, there's always a culture of bullying those beneath you. There are two different types of dive master out there. There are the leaders and the teachers. Leaders are just kind of tour guides that lead groups of qualified divers around dive sites and getting them back to the boat safely, and teachers are what dive masters are really made for, to act as teaching assistants as a sort of secondary kind of trainee instructor. But as with all diver qualifications, dive master has its pros and cons, so let's look at why becoming a dive master sucks and also why it rules. As a DM, you have a lot of waiting around. Your main job during a diver course is to look out for your instructor and the students that they are not focusing on. So when the instructor is witnessing skills of students and actually doing something going along the line, your job is to kind of just watch everyone else and just make sure they're okay. This means that you just kind of hover there, just waiting and watching and just trying to be in the best position should anything go wrong. That's what you do. As a DM, you're often used as a prop too. On a rescue course, you will be probably the unresponsive diver underwater that the student has to find and recover. Doesn't sound too bad until you're sat there just kind of waiting for the student to find you on the bottom, just breathing, which feels like forever. And then you get to be manhandled back to the surface and then dragged out of the water, just kind of watching your fumbled kit just sink to the bottom whilst you pretend to be unconscious. Time to buy a new dive mask, I guess. There's a reason why there are more dive masters than instructors on a dive course, and that's because the dive masters carry all of the heavy kit, so you want as many of them as possible. As an instructor, you don't really want to carry anything, do you? That and ratios, obviously. The instructor has to focus on the entire course and the students, so they don't have the time to carry all the heavy kit to and fro and set up the scenarios. So dive masters are used to do a lot of the manual stuff, and you will be expected to set up and check all of the auxiliary stuff, so that's your job. As a DM, you learn very quickly the best way to carry cylinders so that your hands don't cramp up. It's one thing that you learn very quickly, and remember, if you don't lift with your knees, then you will suffer. You kind of have to be Johnny on the spot with all sorts of kit running backwards and forth, just finding and retrieving that student's missing glove that they've forgotten, or extra lead because they're just not heavy enough, they need more lead. So you're going to be running backwards and forwards. There's a lot of grunt work as a DM. My main tip is to get friendly with the students and convince them to help you out as part of their training. Make your life easier. As a dive master, you are trained to demonstrate skills and recognize flaws so they can be corrected to build better divers. You, however, are quite limited to what you can actually do with students, and this is ultimately why I became an instructor. You can't sign off skills or really anything, to be honest, and that kind of frustrated me because the student can perform a skill perfectly every time when practicing with you in the water, but they then have to wait for the instructor to be free so that they can sign the student off, and you feel a little bit rubbish. In and out of the water, you are a role model for the entire diving community, and students will pick up on your bad habits. So you need to be squared away and doing things properly, because while it may be fine that you can cut corners or do something because you have the skills or the knowledge on how to circumvent something, a student probably won't. So they will just follow you blindly thinking that's just how you do things. So you need to be demonstrating skills constantly. The biggest difference for me when transitioning from a dive master to an instructor was the sudden change in the amount of paperwork. You don't really have that much paperwork to do once you're qualified as a DM. The instructor does pretty much all of the paperwork, which is nice for you. This is the shift of responsibility between a dive master and an instructor when signing off students. You have a lot more paperwork as an instructor. The one bit of paperwork that you are trusted with, though, is the roster sheet as a dive master, clocking everybody in and out of the water so that you have a record of the day's diving. This does get old, though, trust me. Time in, dive time, maximum depth, air in, air out, repeat for every diver, and that's it. And then you have that sort of awkward encounter when you don't really know someone's name. Well, they kind of look like a Jonathan, but I've already filled in Jonathan's details. Do it early, I recommend, because it's far easier when the students' dive computers and BCDs are still in dive mode. They will very quickly dismantle their entire equipment and forget how much gas they have left in their tank, so you're just going to have to write a question mark. They also will not know how to find their maximum depth on their computer very quickly, I promise you that. So try and do it early so that they can just look at it and it's right there.
That's why on the list you should have everyone's name as Frank.
Frank 1.
Frank 1, Frank 2. Not even numbers, just Frank.
Frankly. You are the instructor's sheepdog, looking out for students and making sure that everybody is fine, but students will test you and you need to be able to fix the situation yourself on your own. So students can and will just bolt to the surface with absolutely no notice, and you have to be the one to stop them before they hurt themselves. People do just panic at times, and you need to be confident and, more importantly, calm enough to calm the student down and fix the problem. I had a dive master candidate with a student once doing surface swim with a compass when the student got out of breath, and that then progressed to the early stages of panic on the surface. The DM freaked out themselves, which wasn't going to help the situation. Turns out the student's BCD was just done up a little bit too tight, so after I'd loosened off the straps and the student had caught their breath, everything was fine. But later, talking to the DM, they asked how I was so calm during the situation, and that's just because you have to be. You will rack up time underwater and become a better diver fast as a DM, but it's only beneficial if things actually go wrong and you actually test yourself. As a DM, you should never need to think about yourself or your own kit because you are there to look out for others, but great dive masters are made on rubbish dives because they'll be able to predict problems because they've seen it all before. As a seasoned dive master, you will learn more than you think just by being in and around the industry. You'll learn boat skills, how to fill tanks and mixes, all sorts of different diving styles, and about equipment as well. As a dive master, you'll be confident in the water and find the best diver that you can be by literally immersing yourself in the industry. But as ever, stay humble and remember that you are not bulletproof.
Preachy more!
So the DM level is a nice place to be. It does suck at times because you've got to carry a lot of stuff, but there are some benefits to being a dive master. Yes, you do have to do all of that grunt work and be a bit of a prop at times, but whilst you're training, you're actually training your body and your mind really useful skills subconsciously and how to act in and around the water, making yourself a better diver. But you will always be just an assistant until you become a real instructor. But what do you guys think? Are you a dive master or are you just thinking about becoming a dive master? Have you gone one step further and trained to be an instructor? If so, what was your dive master like? Let's discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving. If you dive at home here in the UK at least, you can maybe get away with a month or so in the warmest months. In the tropics, maybe 4 or 6 months of the year you can get away with a diving season. The water might be warm enough in the other months, but the weather just isn't conducive to, calm diving. If you have the right